The sun was setting. The sun was setting slowly over the quiet neighborhood as Eleanor stepped out of the corner store, a small paper bag clutched in her hand. At 68 years old, life had taught her to move carefully, to watch her step, and to listen closely to the world around her. But nothing in her life had prepared her for what was about to happen that evening. In just a few short minutes, her peace would be shattered. Eleanor walked slowly, leaning heavily on her cane. Each step was deliberate but steady. The sound of sirens made her jump, her heart skipping a beat as two police cruisers came to an abrupt stop along the curb next to her. The squeal of tires seemed to echo in the empty street. Four officers jumped out, moving with quick, purposeful strides. "Hey, you there!" barked one of them, a white man in his late 40s, his face hardened by years of giving orders and expecting them to be followed without question. Eleanor turned, surprised, confused. "Officers," she asked, her voice steady but wary. "Let's see your ID," demanded another officer. He was younger, early 30s maybe, his hand resting dangerously close to the grip of his service weapon. "My ID." Eleanor's brows furrowed as she tried to understand. "What is this about?" The older officer gave her a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Don't ask questions. Just hand it over." Everything inside Eleanor told her something was wrong. This wasn't a routine check. There was an ugliness in the air. Still, she reached into her handbag with trembling fingers and pulled out her wallet, offering her identification. The officer snatched it from her hand with unnecessary force. "What's an old woman like you doing hanging around here?" the younger officer asked, his tone mocking, almost playful. His question drew laughter from the other two officers. Eleanor shivered. She recognized that tone. She'd grown up in a world where men like them saw women like her, black women, as less than human. Still, she lifted her chin. "I was just buying bread," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet dignity that had sustained her for decades. The sergeant, his rank visible on his uniform, clicked his tongue. "We got a report someone's been stealing from the shops around here," he said, narrowing his eyes at her. "And you? You look suspicious." "Suspicious?" Eleanor's voice faltered in disbelief. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I'll be the judge of that," the sergeant said, pocketing her ID without a word about giving it back. Her pulse quickened. They surrounded her now, 4 against 1. An elderly woman. She looked around the street, but no one made eye contact. No one was coming to help. Most people had already learned, don't get involved. "Officers," she said slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. We can talk about it. There's no need for all this." But they weren't looking for calm. One of them grabbed her arm, squeezing tight enough to make her wince. "Don't make a scene, Grandma," the younger officer said with a cruel grin. "You'll just make things worse for both of us." Eleanor felt the pressure on her wrist, knew too well what happened to black folks who resisted. She took a deep breath and glanced at her handbag. Her phone was inside. "Let me make a call," she said, her voice gaining strength. The officers looked at each other, then burst into laughter. "Who are you going to call?" sneered one. "Your dead husband?" Eleanor didn't respond. Slowly, she reached in her bag, pulled out her phone, and dialed. "Hello, son," she said quietly, her voice level. "I need you to come right away." The officers exchanged wary glances. The sergeant's grip tightened. "Who was that?" he demanded. Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes steady. "My son. He's a district attorney." For a heartbeat, the air seemed to thicken. The street, the evening, the entire moment hung in a heavy silence. Then the sergeant laughed harshly, waving a dismissive hand. "Yeah, sure," he said. "District attorney. That's a good one." But the younger officer didn't laugh this time. He cleared his throat, his bravado fading. "Sarge," he said quietly, "what if she's telling the truth?" The sergeant clenched his jaw but didn't loosen his grip. "So what if she is?" he snapped. "She can't do anything to us." Eleanor could see it then. The fear behind the arrogance. The bravado cracking little by little. "You're making a serious mistake," she told him calmly. He yanked her arm a little harder. "I don't want to hear your threats, lady." But the worst was yet to come, or so they thought. A sleek black sedan appeared at the end of the block, tires crunching softly on the asphalt. It pulled up smoothly, stopping just a few yards away. The door opened swiftly, and a tall man stepped out. He was wearing a dark, tailored suit, his expression grim and focused. Every step he took toward them was measured, deliberate. His eyes went to his mother first, then to the officers. "Mom," he said, his voice low but tight with concern. "Are you all right?" Eleanor let out a shaky breath. "I am now." The sergeant took a step forward, trying to reassert control. "And who the hell are you?" The man turned slowly, as if savoring the moment. "I'm Elijah Carter," he said, "district attorney for this county." It was as if someone had punched the air out of the street. Silence fell heavy and sudden. The officers exchanged looks, the youngest paling visibly. Elijah took an ID card from his jacket pocket and held it up for them to see. "Now," he said, his tone cold and sharp, "who wants to tell me why you're harassing my mother?" The sergeant's jaw worked furiously, but no words came. "We don't want any trouble, sir," he said finally, his voice tight. "We were just doing our jobs." "Your job," Elijah repeated, stepping closer, "is detaining an elderly woman without cause? Mocking her? Manhandling her like a criminal?" "We got a report of a robbery," the younger cop said quickly, seizing the opportunity to explain. She matched the description. Elijah barked out a humorless laugh. "Let me guess. Black. Elderly. In a neighborhood where she doesn't belong?" The sergeant folded his arms, but his confidence was slipping. "Listen," he began, "we're not looking for problems here." "You already found them," Elijah replied. "Or maybe you call this police work. I call it abuse." "There's no proof of that," the sergeant shot back. "Oh," Elijah said, his smile thin as paper. "But there is." He pulled out his phone, swiped it open, and showed them a video. The lawyer who had arrived moments earlier, Elijah's colleague, had recorded everything. Every degrading comment. Every rough hand on Eleanor's arm. The sergeant's face broke out in a sheen of sweat. "That doesn't prove anything," he said, but his voice wavered. Elijah raised a brow. "No." He took out another phone and dialed a number. He put on speaker. "This is DA Elijah Carter," he said crisply. "Pull me through to the police commissioner." The sergeant's bravado crumbled. "Wait," he said. "There's no need for that." But it was too late. "Commissioner," Elijah said when the line picked up, "I have an incident of serious police misconduct in progress. I'm requesting internal affairs on site immediately." The sergeant lost all color. "No, wait, please." But the commissioner was already answering. "Understood. Da Carter. I'm dispatching a team now." Elijah ended the call and crossed his arms. "Here's some advice," he said, his voice ice cold. "If you want to keep your badge, now's the time to start talking." Silence. Then, finally, the youngest officer broke. "Sarge," he whispered. "We should—" "Shut your mouth," the sergeant barked. "It's too late," Elijah said. "What matters now is whether you stay loyal to a broken system or save yourselves." The young officer hesitated. His hand shook slightly. Then he met Elijah's eyes. "We were ordered to conduct random stops in this neighborhood," he admitted. Sarge said to make them look legit. As he spoke, 2 more cruisers arrived. Internal affairs officers stepped out, their faces grim. "Who's the complainant?" one of them asked. "I am," Elijah replied. "And I have evidence." He handed over the video. The IA agents turned to the officers. "Sergeant, you and your team will come with us." The sergeant shook his head. "You can't do this." But one of the IA agents stepped in close. "We can, and we are." One by one, the officers were escorted to the cruisers. The sergeant kept protesting until the doors closed behind him. Eleanor watched them go, then turned to her son. Pride filled her heart. "I knew you'd do the right thing," she said softly. Elijah smiled at her, the steel in his expression softening. "Always, Mom." The lawyer approached them. "You handle that well." Elijah sighed. "It's not enough. This wasn't just a bad day or a few bad cops. It's the whole system." Eleanor took his arm, her grip gentle but firm. "Every step counts," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, and today we took a big one." Eleanor turned toward the phone, still recording. her gaze direct and unwavering. For anyone watching, she said, remember this. Silence lets injustice thrive. Don't stay quiet. Don't stand by. Elijah looked at her and nodded. Because the only way to change the system is to confront it.